Welcome. Welcome to another conversation of food service. And shall we call it Food Service Conversation with Marsha Diamond from the Diamond Approach. With today, I have joined with me Chef Aatul Wan, CEC, MSML, CDM, CFPP. Today, we are exploring the potential in your menus and the opportunity to incorporate Mediterranean flavoring, ideas on how to utilize spices and herbs, help you enlarge your menus by menu offering by enlarging your menus. But before we get started, recently, Atul, you have passed the CEC exam. Congratulations. Can you tell me a little bit about the exam? Was it a practical exam or in a testing format? Tell me a little bit about the exam.
Marsha, thanks for having me today. And you talked about the CEC. The CEC is Certified Executive Chef. This is an exam conducted by American Culinary Federation. It's a certifying body for chefs and culinarians, different levels, and this is one of the higher levels. So it took me a few years to get down to this. It had been a dream of mine, but it's basically a proof to the rest of the community, our industry, that I have certain proven skills. Some people don't get it, doesn't matter. But
What was the test? Was the test practical as well as testing? Some of our listeners would be curious. What kind of test does the
Sure.
CEC have to take? Certified.
So the CEC exam involves two parts. There's a written part. It's pretty intense. You have to have certain prerequisites. You have to go through classes. You can do it online, and then there's a written exam. It's a multiple choice at a computer center. You go and get it done, and that actually took me almost 2 years to complete the coursework and finally pass the test. And then you get more time to do the practicum, which is a 3 hour, 15 minute practical test. You are judged or you are proctored by three or more ACF certified proctors. It's very intense, something like I've never done before. There are lots and lots of eyes watching you. They watch every move of yours, they watch every step of yours. You're afraid, I've cooked for 25 plus years and you're afraid of burning a small piece of chicken. As something as simple as that, you're afraid of, is your spinach clean and there's no dirt in that? And then finally comes down to plating and you feel like, oh, is my plate looking clean? Did I use gloves? Did I follow sanitation correct? So it's very intense, covers nutrition, covers food quality, cooking, timeline, pressure. I forgot to turn on my oven. I was always afraid of that. Guess what? Midway I realized my oven is off. So things like that.
Very
Interesting.
intense. Well, congratulations again. Tell me a little bit about the other credentials at the end of your name. What are the other? You have a MSML, CDM, CFPP.
So, Masters of Science in Management and
Right.
Leadership. And I did this online. I am in an acute care healthcare setting. And for moving up the ladder, if you may, I decided to spend the downtime in COVID and do a master's program while I was doing my CEC. And right after I had done my CDM, which is a certification in dietary management. So I'm a certified dietary manager along with a certified food protection professional.
Wow. Wow.
Mouthful, and it just happened. Family support had been incredible because we have kids, and my wife had to take care of them while I was sitting in a room and studying.
So the credentials has allowed you in your advancement of your job and to continue advancement, the more credentials to learn more about, the more I would presume that it's going to continue your route or your journey, your culinary journey. So let me ask you something. How did
Absolutely.
you get started as a culinarian?
I come from a family of business people and professionals back in India, and when I grew up, hospitality, as the Western world, if I may, sees it, and food were integral to our house. We always had visitors. Food was obviously a big part of it. Taking care of guests, whatever form, just being warm and welcoming and making our home comfortable enough for them to visit us again and again. That was how we were raised. That was the nurturing environment I grew up in, and that led to this love for food between my obviously grandma and mom, uncles and aunts, and food all the time. And some crazy thing happened. I decided I want to cook for a living. Uh, Back then, it wasn't very common, especially in India. And did a lot of research, went to hotel school because there were no culinary schools
Right.
then. And there I found out about the Culinary Institute of America in the US. And my instructors there helped me go into a formal culinary program at the CIA. And since then, I've been pursuing this career.
Wow. So they got you into that program and helped you, guidance and
Yeah.
that. So I would think, who was your biggest influencer in your career?
I can't pinpoint one person. I would say it's a bunch of mentors over the years, starting from hotel school. Instructors do have an impact, especially when you're serious and passionate about a subject that you're studying. If you go to a college just for the heck of it, then it's a totally different story. But I was pursuing my passion, and I was really fortunate enough, blessed enough to do that. So, on that note, once I started my career in the US, I got to work with some really tough but extremely skilled, intense people in the US. And those first few executive chefs and chefs in the industry, they who mentored me really honed and directed the way I cook today, the way I work today, and my thought process. And I pass that on to my teams and my family because it's ingrained in my blood cells now.
So I didn't mention, but where do you currently work at this point?
I work for St. Peter's Healthcare System. We are in Central Jersey. It's about a 500-bed hospital with a lot of outpatient and other ancillary support services. It's a big operation. I'm responsible for all of the patient dining. We have 3 retail outlets, plus we do some off-site food deliveries, and obviously there's a catering unit to it.
At home may be different, but I want you to tell me, what is your overarching cooking philosophy? So because you do 500, you have staff there, you have outpatient, you catering, fundraising from the work side, and home side you may have your culinary background, your infusion, your upbringing. So how do you merge the two in your cooking philosophy to have good, healthy food as well as foods that nurtures and gives a good experience?
This question or this concept that you're talking about has so many different answers, so many different tangents that one can get into, right? Cooking philosophy. Cooking philosophy evolves over time. Mine has too. So from the 2000s, Y2K, to now we're in post-COVID, recovering from COVID, back and forth. Especially in healthcare, we get to see a little more of the impact of disease, COVID, health. I'm fortunate again to work with doctors and professionals, clinicians who know their stuff inside out, who live this. I see people who are 60 years old and they look like they're 40, and I'm like, oh, you can't tell the age. But besides that, they have an exercise regimen, they have a diet regimen, and I love eating. I love feeding. And the good part is, even though these people, they may not eat gobs of food, but they know how to eat. And so I get to talk to and interact with these people and what they practice, why they practice, and how they practice. And that has influenced my cooking style, my culinary outlook, and my culinary outlook for the future as I see it. There was a time when it was all about butter and bacon and let's deep fry everything. Well, those days are gone. Yes, there's a place for butter, there's a place for bacon, and for deep frying. And I'm not beating up fats. There are good fats, but how you use it, what quantity you use them, and when do you use them? That's the key part. How do you balance all this stuff? And yeah, I might sound very cliched from a dietetics perspective, but many chefs don't think of that. My family doesn't always think of it. You mentioned home. Well, cooking at home is very different. It was very different. My wife was raised up in a very carb heavy, high fat environment, cooking environment, if you may. And now, she detests processed foods. If I bring home a bag of chips, I love junk food. So I do love junk food, I'll have to say it. If I bring home a bag of chips, she's like, well, keep that out. Don't let the kids see it because they're going to eat it. How do you stop them? Ice cream. Ice cream is a treat. 5 years ago, ice cream was not a treat. It was like, ice cream, just another day of life. Today, ice cream is a treat. You get 2 to 4 ounces of ice cream, and that's enough. Maybe once a week, if that. But you got to work it out. So the greens are important. The different colored vegetables. How do you balance the nutrients between the vegetables? My son is 5, and the best part is that they hear about it in school, they hear about it with their friends, and they see it at home. So it's great when he says he wants spinach. And we're like, wow, okay, you want the spinach and you'll eat the spinach? Sure. And don't bring your work home and don't bring your home to work. Well, I get to bring my work home
Right.
because I can talk about these things. I can talk about, hey, my dietitian today said this, or this is what I saw and this is what I advised a patient. We see, and I personally go to see a lot of patients, and we get a lot of patients who've been told, stop your sugar, cut down your salt, cut down your fat. It's sad because they've been used to this high fat, high sodium, not so nutrient intense diet your whole life. And suddenly one fine day, a doctor comes to you and says, oh, by the way, you just had surgery and XYZ, and from tomorrow you can't eat salt. It's a shock. It's more than a culture change. It's
Right.
that lifestyle change. And people can't take it. So in our personal lives with my family and myself, and then extending that arm into work and vice versa, it's really helping us because I can practice what I preach and the other way around.
So you made some good points as far as it's not one or the other. It's kind of the idea is integration of philosophies, integration of creativity. The more we educate our youth, schools, universities, even in retail, healthcare, elevate healthcare, food service, restaurants, the more we get out the messaging of better ingredients, different type of cuisine, plant-based, the more we kind of food as part of their health and wellness and healing and integrity. So again, if we start on that journey, yes, you can have a treat, cakes, moderation, but it's what we choose. So how do you find a balance between expressing your menu creativity and maybe reflecting a menu focused on a regional cuisine or incorporating that? I mean, you've got, I know you personally, I know you very creative, and sometimes you get handcuffed, whether it's because of food cost goals or it's a regional area or it's a supply chain challenge. So in today's world, how do you keep your creativity and offer the best options? How can you do that, or how will you be doing that?
The creativity going, another word that people use in the corporate is innovation, right?
Innovation,
And
innovation. Mhm.
right, if I want to say, it's a couple of factors here. First, keep your mind open,
Mhm.
because as the culinary lead or leader in the operation, be it at home, it's actually more tough at home than at work, to think about a different menu. How do it's like we're part of food service is the cafeteria business, right? So be it a university, be it BNI, be it healthcare, schools, you're feeding the same clientele every day, year after year, month after month. At home, you're feeding the same family every day. How do you keep it exciting? When you ask the kids, and I'm sure many people on this forum will resonate with this. Hey, what do you want to eat today? I don't know. And then you go make what you want. I don't like this. Well, I just asked you. Didn't I ask you what do you want to eat? How many homes have that problem or challenge or whatever you want to tell me that is? Ours, when I grew up, that was an issue. Till today, it's an issue. My wife asked me, what do you want to eat? I never have an answer. Because after living as a bachelor, living under mom, working in the culinary industry, I've learned you better eat what comes on your plate. So that is one piece. But that also helps me keep an open mind. And the second part is thinking outside the box. Open mind, thinking outside the box. Two things that go together. And keeping in touch with the industry trends. Trends evolve, they go, they come. There was a trend for heat. There was a trend for Nashville sauce. There was a trend for turducken. There was a trend for everything kale. Well, it'll come back if it's gone. There was a trend for 5-layer burger with bacon and Swiss cheese in the middle with a sliver of lettuce. Will come back. But how do I keep the things exciting? Reading magazines, watching a little bit of TV, some social media. What are people talking about? What are quick service restaurant chains and operators doing in the market today? So if a chain is going to say, well, we're having donut pudding, okay, that's going to be the next thing on our menu. Um, Make sure it's portion controlled, delicious, satisfying for my guest base, be it patients, be it uh, paying customers, be it employees. And once that shelf life is gone, once that product is over, you move to the next one.
So
So you just keep
the
evolving.
type of ingredient, so I'm gonna segue before you do your demo in a moment, but the type of ingredient you utilize is kind of crucial, I believe, and I think I've spoken to you about this and other chefs, is that, whether it's a plant-based, it's a beef burger with mushroom blended, or it's a plant-based burger, or it's a bowl which has base quinoa and then maybe different ingredients and different proteins. The idea is it's the type of ingredients, it's the type of olive oil, it's just not a generic. That will make the difference in the taste profile. So even at home, or even if it's for family or in non-commercial, if you take your recipe and take the best ingredients you can within that recipe, it could be canned tomatoes if it's not in seed, it could be canned, but the best ingredients for that time, and incorporate it with the best spices and herbs, I think you give an experience that speaks volumes
To your
versus
customer base.
just
Yeah.
um, just as far as fads, they come and go. Trends are kind of tractions now, especially coming out of COVID. I think people are being more aware of what they put into their body, the cleaner ingredients, the types of foods, the types of oils, the type. So again, I think it translates, or it extends into different food service. I know when I go out now, yes, there are times I want a treat, but I'm also looking at a restaurant. Maybe I'm a repeat customer there. I want to see the diversity within that. So let's pause a moment. I got some more questions, but let's just watch your demo, your food demo that you're doing right now. So give us a moment and let's see the food demo.
We're talking about paella today, a very traditional and typical dish from Spain, from the Mediterranean region. So join me as we discuss a dish which is intense in history and heritage, and also in aroma, taste, and flavor. Paella, a very simple, yet you can complicate it and make it complex. Rice dish, which could be vegetarian, chicken-based, seafood-based, or whatever you'd like it to be. The history of paella is so intense that everybody claims to have their own traditional style of doing it. Different, you can go to grandmas and moms and sisters and cousins, and each one has a different way to do it. Across the globe, the same dish can be reproduced in different ways. I hail from India, and over there there's biryani. In Iran, there's pilaf. In China, there's a clay pot. In South America, there is arroz con pollo. So the essence of this dish is the same. It's a one-pot meal. The base is rice. You can add vegetables. You can add any kind of meat, and there's a lot of aromatics. The whole idea is, how do you make it healthy? How do you make it wholesome yet forgiving, so you don't overdo and mess your body up? So as we start discussing, in my display here, I have a lot of spices to start with. That's where my heart is. The flavor profile. 0 calories, maximum punch of flavor, maximum micronutrients, and as we get into food as medicine in this age and day, these spices and these herbs, they are the ones that are taking the forefront. Meat is taking the back seat, and vegetables come in the middle. Carbohydrates, keep it to a limit so that the body can process that. A lot of these ingredients that I have here, I'm going to use some to make this dish, and the rest are just to showcase the impact of flavor profile in a dish that you can make similar to paella. Here I have some herbs. Today I have some scallions and some parsley. I have vegetables. I'm making a vegetarian paella. and I have some spices that I got from home to display how you can concoct the recipe and make my style of paella, or if you're making a different rice dish, just a flavored rice dish, you can use anything just to get that burst of flavor and aroma. In paella, supposedly one of the most important ingredients is saffron, right here. My favorite spice, grew up with it. It's so aromatic, extremely aromatic. As it sits here, I've taken a few fronds. I can just smell it. It's filled this whole kitchen that I am in, and very light and delicate. We could do a different session on this some other time, but I'm going to show you a few tricks on that. So let's just get started first. In paella, you don't use a long grain basmati kind of rice. You use a kind of short grain. Arborio is fine, or rice from Spain. And here I have just regular Uncle Ben's. I want to make it simple. Basically what I have in my kitchen, that's what I'm using here today. And we're going to start with aromatics. So I'm going to use some onion, garlic, some whole spices to get the base going. I do saute the rice, set it aside, and then if you had chicken or shrimp, you would sear it, place it on the rice, cook it all together, and then the rice would fluff up. But today I'm going to just use vegetables. So the trick that I have done is I've soaked my rice, voila. I soaked my rice for 20 minutes, washed it out, soaked it so it absorbs water, helps it to cook a little faster. But that's not the essence of what we're talking about. We're not talking about rice cooking. We're talking about the impact of flavor, of aromas, and how that helps our cooking style, our eating style. The idea is, how do we use less salt, an optimal amount of fats? I'm not saying less fat, optimal amount of fats, right kind of fats, to make our dish, make our health better for us. In this pan here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to set this dry rice away. I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil. Again, olive oil is a misnomer, right? Everybody thinks, let's do everything with olive oil. First pressed, cold, virgin, extra virgin. There's so much to it. I mean, the industry of olive oil is trillions of dollars. But I'm just using an extra virgin olive oil because I'm not frying with it. I'm not doing a whole lot of intense cooking with it. We're just going to saute some spices and some aromatics, my peppers and onions, etc. And then we're going to incorporate that in the rice, which is going to add to the flavor. So, a little bit of olive oil over here. You can see it shimmers in my pan. The pan's getting hot. And as that gets hot, we turn the heat down a little bit. So I added some olive oil to my pan, and now I'm going to add some onion. Saute the onion. While I add my onions, I got some whole spices going. Two bay leaves. Bay leaf gives that earthiness, that umami-ness. Again, 0 calories. Bay leaf, I think every culture, almost every culture, every continent, almost every cuisine that I know of uses bay leaf. From savory to non-savory. In desserts also you have bay leaf, to give that hidden back flavor profile at the back of your throat. And it comes out beautiful. So we have some onions sweating right now. We're going to add some garlic. So at this point, my onions and garlic have sweat. I put some bay leaf in it. I'm also going to add a little bit of sliced shallots. The beautiful aroma of bay leaves combined with onions and garlic is filling this air. It's really awesome. And now I add these shallots, which are going to add the shallots are going to add a different depth and complexity of flavor to the whole onion garlic profile. You see, all this stuff has sweat. There's a little bit of caramelization. I personally love the browning of caramelization. Maillard's reaction, we get into the scientific piece of it, and it brings out another depth of complex flavors to this dish. So at this point, I'm going to add my wet rice, which has soaked for a little while, right here. I am coating the rice with the oil, with the onions, with my aromatics, and almost sauteing the rice, but not actually cooking it in the fat. Yes, people use chorizo, they use bacon, you can use different kinds of fats for it. But again, the idea here is how do we go lower in sodium, lower and optimal use of fats, and using the right ingredients, which is reduced calorie but flavor impacting ingredients like these herbs. So I can hear the rice popping. We don't want to burn. We don't want to burn the rice. And at this time, I'm going to add some vegetable stock because it's vegetarian, or I would have added chicken stock or something of that sort, and par cook the rice. I'm going to cook it halfway. It takes about 14 minutes. Then I would add my meats if I am using meats or seafood, and then finish cooking the rice and the seafood together. Again, the one-pot dish, the paella. While the rice is par cooking, I'm going to do some vegetable prep. We're going to talk about some vegetables. So let's get there. Adding some vegetable stock. You can see it simmer the rice in the broth with the ingredients. While we're here, I have some whole chilies. I'm actually going to pop one chili in at this time. It's going to impact the heat and also give it additional flavor. It's a dried chili darbol. So the chili here, paellas are not really spicy, but I am adding this chili over here. It's not going to make this dish spicy. It's just going to give it a kick. Here I have some cardamom over here. I have some mace, which is on the outer side of a nutmeg, black peppercorns, and again, these are all aromatics, flavoring ingredients. And this is my plethora of spices. While we're on the topic of paella, I want to share a secret with you. Some people know it, most people don't. How do you get the maximum flavor out of saffron? Saffron, sacred, holy, delicate, extremely feminine, love of my heart, one of the most favorite ingredients outside of chocolate that I would almost die for, saffron. Integral to Spain, Afghanistan, and some of those hilly areas, comes from the frond of the flower. And here we have saffron. So what I'm going to do is a warm pan, I'm just putting it next to my cheek to see how warm it is. We toast it lightly, and then we add a little bit of milk. People add wine. I'm not into that. Because it's sacred to me, you add some milk and let it bloom. And the flavor comes out, the color comes out, and that's what we're going to incorporate into a paella. So, the pan gets a little more warm. I'm going to get my milk, and we'll be ready. The pan is really hot right now. This is my bag of saffron. I'm holding it away. Put the saffron in. Quick twirl. You can see it pop almost. You don't want it to burn. I can smell it. The smell is really strong right now. It gets dark, and here goes the milk. You see how that color popped right away? If you don't do this and you just sprinkle the saffron, you don't get that intensity of color. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. How do you use spices? Same thing with herbs. How do you use the herbs to get the maximum bang for the buck when you're making a dish? We don't have to cook this a whole lot. This is enough. We're going to set this aside. The milk will keep extracting, the warm milk will keep extracting the flavor and the color from this saffron as it sits, and we're going to use that later on. So right now you can hear my rice simmering. There's a hint of drying in the bottom. And you can control the liquid that you want. It's just about halfway done. I'm going to cook it a little more before I transfer it all to in a different pot and incorporate the vegetables in it. I'm going to cook it a little more and then incorporate the vegetables in it and finish it with the veggies and some herbs. While the rice simmers, I'm going to work on my herbs, which are my favorite part for finishing any dish. Herbs are my favorite part for finishing any dish, and unfortunately I don't have any cilantro, but this dish would have done really well with cilantro. So, finely shredded parsley. I'm also going to use the parsley stalks, cilantro stalks, basil, whatever you want to use. Here are my scallions, giving that grassy onion flavor, obviously used very extensively in Asian cuisine, regardless of the country. But I also use them in making a South American sofrito, which is like a chutney from India, like a pesto, a marinade, a sauce, or whatever you want it to be, because it gives that onion without adding the onion, the real onion, and it also gives a color profile and a different herbaceous grassiness to the dish, which gives that freshness when you're presenting a dish. But that's sofrito. So digressing from that, let's get back to our main dish over here. Today we're going to use some shredded Brussels sprouts. I'm going to be working on some yellow squash. You know, people say don't use this, don't use that. And my take is, why not? I'm not making a traditional dish. I'm just working on something wholesome. Some bright red bell peppers, and you could cut them bigger if you want that bigger mouthfeel. A little bit of green pepper. There was a blog online that said, don't add beans, please don't add beans. Well, I'm adding fresh green beans. For that next level of umaminess, earthiness, to give it that meaty profile, I'm going to use some sliced mushrooms, and another very important ingredient in paella is the use of tomato. And folks, here is my vegan paella, mixed vegetables, lots of umaminess, saffron, not a pinch of salt if you noticed. You can make it as you like, and I hope you enjoy the cooking and eating.
Tell me about that dish you just made. I know you talked about it during it, but just give me an overarching, quick, why did you choose that, and what are the core ingredients?
I just made a vegetarian paella, and the idea was to make a paella. I just chose it to be vegetarian because our family is vegetarian and I'm a vegetarian at heart. But that being said, the focus was Mediterranean, and it did not have to be paella per se, because when people talk about Mediterranean, it doesn't have to be a dish from the Mediterranean. It just happened that I'm a rice guy, love rice, and paella happens to be paella and risotto are the two things that come from the Mediterranean. To me, paella seemed a little lighter. You didn't have to put the butter and gobs of wine in like you would do in the risotto. But in the paella, what I did was I just took regular parboiled rice, Uncle Ben's parboiled rice.
So rice is one. What's the next?
Rice was the key ingredient, and the next ingredients were vegetables.
And you put in your
Onion
particular
vegetables.
vegetables, but it could be any.
Correct. So in the vegetable, there are two categories. One is the aromatics, garlic and onion, and the other part is the base vegetable, to beans and carrots and all that kind of stuff. And then you have a little bit of good fat. So I did use for this dish
Olive oil.
extra virgin olive oil.
Ideal.
And then there are the true aromatics, the herbs and spices. Again, core to my heart, core to my cooking philosophy. We talked about cooking philosophy, but I didn't get into details on this, but core to my cooking philosophy, herbs, spices, which pretty much, from a layman's perspective, 0 calories, 0 salt, and high in micronutrients, and packed with punches of flavor. And how do you make that food exciting? We talked about how do you make diversity to the food, and menu creativity, and keeping the food exciting. It's those spices, herbs, the flavor profile. Who wants to eat just a tomato? Well, yes, in summer, okay, beautiful tomato, great. But if I can accentuate that tomato, be it a frozen tomato, be it a dried tomato, be it a canned tomato, be it a fresh tomato, by adding that beautiful basil or a hint of olive oil or a pinch of that special sea salt or some finely ground cracked pepper or fresh cracked pepper, that makes the world of difference. So in the paella, tomato, onions, garlic, base vegetable. In the spices, I added some bay leaf to give that umaminess, that earthiness, and I've also added some dried spices, oregano, sauteed all of that stuff up. There's the cooking style of my rice. Added some simple, low sodium vegetable stock, then added the vegetables and built it up, topped it all with saffron. Saffron and chocolate, two of my favorite ingredients, but saffron, and I've shown how saffron should be used or can be used. So we add that, I call it a feminine touch to that dish by adding saffron and letting it infuse in all of those ingredients. And as you watch this video, you will see how colorful, and I wish you could really, I truly wish you could smell the fragrance that comes off when that dish finishes.
One of the things I'm hearing you say is elevating the customer experience, spice and herbs bars. What is your strategy to enlarge your menu offerings without enlarging your menu inventory? Because you mentioned a spice and herb bar is a differential adding to the customer experience, but we're turning here and we're going, well, we don't have the labor, so how do we increase or enlarge our menu offerings no matter what market segment we're in food service without enlarging our menu inventory?
You just hit a few key points. Labor, paucity of labor, and labor basically means human labor hours, time. The chef has less time, the operators have less time. How do you maximize that? So you have to use your brain and become creative. And if I'm taking the same ingredient, so with budget restrictions or limitations with supply chain, I can get only certain kinds of potatoes, or I can get only certain kinds of breads, and so on and so forth. We take the same ingredient and just give it a different spin by adding different taste profile, which for me comes from herbs and spices. So pre-COVID, in our hospital, we had an herb bar, a very small herb bar. And what happened was I was trying to satisfy our guest base, our patient base. People would stay here for 3 days to a week, getting bored with the same menu. How do you differentiate that? How, again, same point we've been talking about. How do you keep it exciting for them? And I realized people are looking for freshness in the food. Our food was designed to hold on a plate for hours. Fine, not a big deal, but I opened up a herb bar. We had cilantro, parsley, basil. Patient would call down, place the order. Depending on the dietetic restrictions, if they could, the person on the phone would say, hey, can I get you parsley, basil, or cilantro? And this is what we recommend. So for example, if you're getting an eggplant parm, they would recommend basil. If you're getting a quesadilla, they would recommend cilantro. And what we do is, in our cold production area, the person just chops it up. We have the scissors which cut herbs, put it in a 1 ounce container, and we would send it with a tray. Total different perception of people, because now you can add your herbs. And think about it. Open that little container. Hospital room smelling of sanitizer and chemicals and medication all around. And you have that smell in your head. And suddenly you smell this fresh herbaceous thing in your hand and how you can use it. People would just keep it there like, oh, this is my room freshener. And we would encourage them to use it in the food, like eat it. It'll help you. They were satisfied. But that was a big game changer for us. With COVID, things changed, again, supply chain. So we paused that. But again, adding that level of 0 calorie, 0 sodium, 0 fat flavor profile to take it to the next notch up, take it to those few steps up, and just creating a whole mindset change.
So what I'm hearing is that, if you have meatloaf, for example, a basic meatloaf, you can incorporate some herbs and spices to make it more of a Mexican meatloaf, or perhaps more of a an Asian influence, depending on
Diverse,
what herbs and
yes.
spices. So it allows people to have options to choose from on a menu or in a cafeteria so that they can enhance the flavoring or maybe add a spice that they would have never thought about. Maybe it's something else,
Absolutely.
especially in senior
Absolutely.
dining. That's a way to have the same inventory of proteins, but then extend it with different the rices, the quinoas, the different grains, the bulgur, and then add some herb spices. That's kind of what drives me thinking about the Mediterranean diet lifestyle cuisine, which offers herbs and spices and more fruits and vegetables, some proteins, but not, they're really using that core kind of ingredients. Something you mentioned, which I know you keep herbs and spices, you said no calories, but I'm also thinking about how about a nut bar for people that can have it? How about a nut bar or pistachio and walnuts? We put into salads the same type of nuts. Perhaps it would be herbs, spices, and nut bar for people that are allowed to have obviously nuts, but it doesn't have a peanut. It could be a tree nut of a different sorts. To me, I think about the menu inventory. If we'd extend it with just touches of those kind of things, they would eat more of a healthier lifestyle. The walnuts, the pistachios, extend, cardiac and healing. And it would allow people not to have the mundane thing. When you have a salad at home, which I'm sure you get the salad packets, let's say. Let's say you get already cut up, and it comes
Hmm.
with a pre-existing kind of nuts dressing. But if that same salad came cut up with no dressing, and you had pistachios and dried fruit or whatever, and you added to it, it gives you a different profile because maybe every day you have salad, but if you have different, it kind of takes the texture, it takes the taste, it gives you a feeling of better eating, more healing
Yep.
versus just types of lettuce, and maybe fruits.
Yep.
So is that something that you think chefs, especially in restaurants or healthcare or should be thinking of so that because you reduce labor, but you have these things pre-prepped? It doesn't mean you do every herb, every spice, every nut, but it means that you take a look at it and what would make sense to enlarge that experience. Does that kind of from a cost and
Resonate.
labor, does that make
So from a
sense?
cost perspective, what's happening now is that nuts are being accessible by us food service professionals in smaller packages than they were earlier. And I think this is because the vendors are getting smarter, the manufacturers are getting smarter. Like, hey, he's not going to buy 5 kilos of a bag of walnuts because it's going to last such a long time. And with more allergy issues and all, chefs are not using a whole lot of that, right? So how do I hold on to it? Especially smaller operators. How do I hold on to 5 kilos of stuff? But we carry nuts in individual bags, and I encourage, exactly like you said, salads, etc. We encourage our patrons to enjoy nuts on the side.
Okay,
Unfortunately, because we are in a hospital, so we are a nut-free zone. The only thing we do is prepackaged peanuts for
right,
peanuts and
right.
peanut butter. But that's just our isolated situation. At home, we are not crazy. I mean, you talked about walnuts, pistachios. I'm talking about almonds. They are so satiating, and what I mean by that is if you take 3 ounces, 4 ounces of almonds. And I think some of this knowledge is also because I work with dietitians who
Right.
are crazy about this kind of stuff. And you chew that slowly, it almost fills you up. You don't need chewing gum, and like nobody eats chewing gum in an operation. None of our staff eats chewing gum. They're always snacking on something different. So if you take one almond at a time and keep chewing it and keep chewing it, and if you practice that, your lifestyle will change. And I suggest you take that practice and propagate that with your guest base. And believe it, I talk to my patients about this kind of stuff. And people don't know. They really don't know how to enjoy food. And I remember when I was in school, there was a gentleman from Taiwan, and he was talking to me about how he keeps chewing his rice. And he said, you keep chewing your rice and it gets sweeter. Simple science. Rice is sugar. If you keep chewing it, A, you're going to get satiated and you will eat lesser amount of rice. And B, you will get enjoy the entire taste.
The thing, what you said is, one of the things that's satiety, the nuts, what I've seen a lot more now is even dried fruits, dried strawberries, dried blueberries, dried. So that's another thing that can be incorporated because you have a tree, a nut free, those things can be incorporated. I just think there's herbs, spices, there's so much dehydrated fruits and vegetables, so much more that can be added without, again, increasing your protein inventory, but increasing that because of space and time. I think, and also some places can't get fresh fruits all year round, but and I started to get, especially during this period of time, into the dried strawberries, dried blueberries, and put them in my salads and put it in my cereal and put it in cooking sometimes because it, when you add it to it.
To your point, now these ingredients are also, I would say, not completely easily, but I would
More
say they are
accessible.
much more accessible in grocery stores, and not just in metro areas. They're
Just not in
accessible pretty
specialty,
much
it's more
everywhere.
mainstream. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen them in a dollar store, and it's not just in the U.S. or North America or Europe. They are across the globe. I mean, the world is a smaller place. Everybody knows what everybody's eating, how they're eating, and everybody wants to eat and practice the best practice.
I could speak to you for a very long time, but since we're coming to our kind of end, I got a few more questions because this could be 2 hours of food conversations, and Atul and I have done that. Um, so tell me, what about the Mediterranean diet lifestyle resonates with you for work, for your patients, for your staff? What resonates with you? And then what are your top two tips for boosting flavors with spices and herbs?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is the balance in ingredients. So when I say balance in ingredients, it's the balance in, I look at colors, right? Colors of ingredients. So that balance, and the minute you look at that, it has a full blown nutritional impact to it. The second part is the quantity used. You know, I'm not saying Mediterranean diet is void of deep fried or is void of pork or is void of what we may perceive as unhealthy. See, what happens is the unhealthy becomes unhealthy when we abuse it. The unhealthy can be healthy if you do it right. Are you eating a pound of bacon for a meal, or are you eating an ounce of bacon for a meal? Along with, hey, some broccoli and some cauliflower and some roasted tomatoes, stuff like that. There was a time when if you served grilled broccoli for breakfast, people would throw it at your face. Today you serve it, there'll be a line standing there grabbing it up. Very different mindset.
So what would you say the lifestyle as far as, there's, we're talking about using EVOO, we're talking about fruits and vegetables, they're doing grilled lettuce, we're talking about eating more plant-based items, fresh, it doesn't, well, more diversity, more herbs and spices so that you have more powerful. So in personally, I know you have a little bit more, flexibility, but when you come to your facility in healthcare food service, you're more contained when it comes to labor and cost. So what would be your top two things that you would say to infuse that kind of Mediterranean offerings? How to elevate the experience? If you had to take time, I know you have a lot because you've said it, and also in your demo, you've shown a lot. But if you had to say top two, someone said, I want to institute two things or three things, what would you say to do tomorrow to get that Mediterranean, which again, it's that more fruits and vegetable plant based? Yes, we know everyone should be eating in moderation more of that, but we're trying to promote more healing, more of that. So if you're the chef saying to your dietitians who already know some of this, we hope, or your rest of your culinary team, we want to do this because this is the trend of healthy or food as medicine eating. What would you say?
My suggestion, have a colorful plate. The green, the red, the orange, the white, and the brown. Don't have it all brown as it used to be. It's very important that. Second part, flavor profile. It's not easy to cut down your sodium and fat, but that's a global epidemic. Sorry if I'm talking off
No,
culinary,
it's
but
good, but so
the
herbs and
remedies.
spices would allow you to do that. Your
Exactly.
herbs and
How do
spices
I
let you.
manage sugar, salt, and fat? Top three. You don't need to go anywhere else. Just top three.
Perfect.
The only way to do that is herbs and spices. And okay, I'm Indian, and I keep saying this cliched sentence of mine is, "Hey, I got spices in my veins." Well, yeah, I got it. Moving on. It's not about that. The world is so small with social media, with access to so many international stores. You don't have to go to Spain to get the best saffron, or you don't have to go to Afghanistan to get the best saffron. You can go to your local store, you can Google it, find what you'd like, find what resonates with you, experiment, go to a restaurant, taste a few things, ask a few questions, and try to incorporate that. That's the way I would suggest you delve into and kind of open the door of Mediterranean cuisine, because Mediterranean cuisine is not, or diet, Mediterranean diet is not just from the Mediterranean. You can take a hardcore South American or Asian diet and follow the Mediterranean diet guidelines.
That's perfectly said. That's excellent. But I wanted to make a point. The Mediterranean diet lifestyle is really just about. It started out in Italy, that someone kind of observed people who were eating that way, and what they found is the types of ingredients that was put into it. So that it's called that because that's the origin. However, tomatoes from New Jersey, but walnuts from California. The idea is the types of food. So I think people have to understand it's shaping how we influence high volume food service and how we incorporate that. The types of walnuts. We take certain wines, there's certain types of walnuts. We take certain olive oil. I mean, the quality of your ingredient is going to enhance the quality, and yet less is more. So incorporating that quality of the ingredient, you may not have to do as much as you would, and yet that loyalty will come back. One of the things I wanted to tell you, and let me hear what you think about this before we close today. Today you can embrace and experience a world of flavors in your home and in your neighborhood. Be open to learn flavors and bridge cultural gaps, as a food is connection. Be open to learn flavors and bridge cultural gaps, because food is connection. New foods and spices can add a satiety and healthy addition to your diets, to your menus, to individual. It's food with new flavors. When you took paella, to me, it was like, it's yesterday's recipes with today's flavors. I look at a babka, and people may say, what's a babka? Babka is kind of a Greek cake or pastry, but you can make babka using that same with guava paste and with cream cheese, or with dulce de leche and caramel. It doesn't make it. It's bridging the cultural expectations together in connection. I think of food as connection. We go out, we break bread, you and I. We do it for connection. We share. He and I went to a Mediterranean restaurant actually, and we shared cuisines, because we were trying to see, embrace and looking at different things. Now again, the more I go through my journey of life, I experience different types of foods that I probably would have never experienced. But the more I find that the heightened of the experience is because of bridging of flavors and different cuisines from different parts of the world. So I think that's what I embrace when I look at. I've been unfortunately in healthcare a lot more this year, looking at things, and I see different parts of the countries and different regions embracing that. I think that's the differential. To me, that's the differential. What's going to make me come back to your hospital food service if I was staff in there. It's going to make me come back to that restaurant. If I can say that if you're making the same meatloaf every day and I don't see any cultural connection, well, if I don't want meatloaf, I'm not going to go there. But if I see you have a menu, and on that menu offering is different flavors, different nuts, your choice, I'm going to go, oh, they make this food really good. I went to a Mexican restaurant Monday, and they have a dish that's grilled chicken, turkey, fish, I can't remember which fish, turkey, beef. That's their choice of, or tofu or vegetables, choice for protein. Then they have their black beans or refried beans. Then they have their fresh tomatoes or pico gaya, and then they have their the rice, the yellow rice, the saffron rice. But they give you the choice. Now the ingredients are just, you have to realize the core ingredients, but they different in infusion. Yes, it was Mexican, so their infusion of what they use on it. However, their herbs and maybe a little bit different, but for one dish, they didn't have to enlarge their inventory.
Right.
Think about it. So the same thing can happen here, but again, you work with people that are from different backgrounds, and so if you incorporate their culture or their cuisine, or you incorporate different people's background, food is connection.
Absolutely. Food, when you mentioned the phrase food is connection, regardless of which segment you are in, which country you are in, this is one place where we all connect, because, in the healthcare world, we say the patient can't choose anything except one thing, which is food. The family is a given, the nurses are given, the doctors are given, the surgery and the medical treatment is a given. The patients can't choose the medication because the doctor is prescribing that. But you're already at the healthcare facility, so you're stuck with that. What can you choose? The only option you have is the food, and that's the connection, and that's our passion.
Healthcare has an obligation in a way whether it's senior living or health or hospital food service, to step it up, but in the sense of stepping up with flavors. And you've taught me that when you did the urban spice bars, when you were doing that, I was just amazed. And I know that you and I've talked about this, that urban spice bar for patients in retail. To me, that just opened my mind even before I kind of embraced more Mediterranean. But that, so again, I think, when I look at what you're doing and what you try to do and how you're incorporating it, yeah, so that paella was a perfect dish to kind of do that. Thank you for doing that demo. And thank you for sharing and having a conversation today and taking time out of your busy day.
Thank you, and you're very welcome. It's been fun talking.